Hello, and my name is Lawrence Jackson. I'm with the Emerging Enterprise Group, and I have the pleasure of talking with one of my favorite business consultants, Miss Laura Sigmund of Best Practices Consulting. And we are doing this interview for the Business Triage Systems Group. And we want to get some information from Ms. Sigmund about a couple of things. So first, we're going to talk about a follow-up to the interview that we did about 2 weeks ago. Understanding the proper use of credit. And she has a trip planned to Baltimore.
Yes, sir.
And remember, we talked about it and said a credit card would be the best credit tool to use for that type of trip. So now we have an actual trip that's planned.
Absolutely.
And we want to talk a little bit about it. So when you were looking at how to pay for this trip, tell us what your thought process was.
So before I even decided where I wanted to go, I created a budget for that space first.
A budget? Wow.
A budget.
Okay.
I start first and foremost with a budget. So last week we spent a few days in Gary, Indiana. And that was budget fit too. I wanted to spend a budget to do some follow-up, but because Baltimore is a new landing space for me, it too has its own budget.
Okay.
And because I recognize I'm going to be there for maybe 3 to 5 days at a period of time, I'm going to absolutely use the credit card because I'm able to plan out the car, the airport, the lodging, the meals, any printed matter that I think I need to put into, the marketplace while I'm reaching out to these people. But it first started with the budget.
Okay.
Right? So I'm going to use the credit card with the intent to pay it off when the bill comes due.
Okay.
If I were to get to Baltimore and maybe even, God willing and creek don't rise, a contract was to come to fruition then and there, I would probably move away from an actual credit card to a line of credit.
Okay.
I would transfer simply because I want to reduce the mitigation of cash and at what interest rates, right?
Mitigation of cash. That's pretty.
So I'm depleting my reserves.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I'm depleting my reserves, and I don't want to deplete more than I can afford to replenish while I'm waiting for that gap to be fulfilled.
Okay.
Right. Because I have to cannibalize one form of money for another form while I'm waiting for something to actually come in.
So one last quick question.
Sure.
So now, trip's over. What do you do? In other words, in terms of looking at that credit card and looking at the results that you got, do you automatically, you say you're going to pay it off in 30 days, do you look at other things in your budget to see if the funds are there to pay it off, or how do you process that?
I typically have front loads. I front load my reserves in advance of, so when I create a budget, I legitimately have the money in reserves.
Okay.
Typically.
Okay.
I very rarely operate in arrears.
Okay.
That's
but now for those of us who are not as well heeled, and we stepping out on faith, and we're doing all these wonderful things. I would still start with
a budget, and I wouldn't care as much as if I had it on hand or if I thought it was forthcoming. I would still start with a budget.
Would you still look at a time certain to pay that credit?
Sure. Everything should have a timetable and a scoring mechanism, right? From the time I think I can bring a project to fruition to the time I think I can actually monetize that connection, a timeline and a budget.
Okay.
Right? So if you know you're going to pay a little interest on the credit card, we got to look at the level of interest that you're willing to pay. If you have a line of credit, obviously it should be, the terms and the interest rate should be smaller, right? Or the form of cash is cheaper. Not so much cash, but the instrument is cheaper.
Right.
So you're paying less out in I guess interest, so to speak.
And kind of using that card for convenience sake, because if you're using cash, you have to keep.
It's just a matter of transferring the credit for cash.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Same thing for line of credit if you can.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sigmund. Our executive producer has given me the thumbs up. It's time to exit this one, but we'll be back.
All righty.
Get sophisticated.